I'm David Chandler, and I'll be the nominal host. And then other co-hosts are going to be Fran Schur and Marty Hopper. So if we want to get started, Colorado 9/11 Truth is putting on one of our programs. We've in the past have put on programs with live speakers in auditoriums and things like that. But by doing it, because we don't want to gather a lot of people together, it also opens the door that people can come in here who wouldn't not normally be traveling to Colorado. So it opens the door a lot wider than usual. So that's why we can do this. I think this is a potentially really good format for this kind of a presentation. So anyway, we basically invited as our guest for tonight, Erik Lawyer, to be the speaker. And then in our initial conversations and so forth, I just happened to ask, well, do you know any other firefighters that might want to join in? And so we have sort of a crew. So it's going to be Erik Lawyer plus a bunch of guys. And so I'm going to introduce Erik just briefly here. I'm just going to read this little bio clip, and then Erik is going to tell us a little bit about each of the others. This is Erik Lawyer. So he's a retired Seattle firefighter, 25 years emergency service experience as both a paramedic and a firefighter. He's now taking the lessons learned from 9/11 and his experience as a firefighter to support teams working together through on increasing local resiliency. And he might want to be able to flesh out some of what all of that means. So, but for right now, Erik, would you like to say a few words and then introduce the other guys you invited along?
Perfect. Thank you, David. Yeah, it's an honor to be here. And it's also really it feels really good to have the other guys that said yes almost immediately. I mean, they did immediately as soon as I asked. So for those who don't know, they were just asked a couple days ago and everyone's here. So that's a really good sign, I think, for what's unfolding with 9/11 Truth. And yeah, with that, just I guess briefly, many of you know I've been out of the 9/11 Truth movement for years, and there's a lot of things I don't want to go into too much detail there. I'm coming back, but in a different way. My focus is on where do we go from here, but also helping, activate Firefighters 9/11 Truth in a way that it starts connecting with more firefighters. So that's kind of why, the 6 of us are here today, and the intention is to really help other firefighters see that there's more of us out there than you might think. And I think it's time for us to rise together and stand for this together. So with that, I'd like to introduce first Christopher Joya. So here's Christopher, and I'm sure most people on this call know him. He's a New York Fire Commissioner and a 30-year member of the Franklin Square and Munson Fire Department. And he served as chief from 2007 to 2012. And he's also a Marine Corps veteran and an EMT for 25 years. So Chris, it's an honor to have you here, and so grateful for all the work you've been doing. It's been incredible what you've been bringing forward. And I think a lot of what you've done has activated the fire service in a whole new way. So I know a lot of guys I know are motivated by what you've stood up for. So thank you.
Thank you, Erik. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for having me here.
You're welcome. Thanks. And then the next is firefighter Paul Cayley here. Paul is a British firefighter. So it's 2 o'clock in the morning where Paul is right now. And Paul's really stepped in a while back and has really helped keep Firefighters 9/11 Truth alive. He's done a ton of work. He's been an incredible support. And he has 26 years emergency service experience, 5 as a police officer, and 21 as a firefighter. And he's also the producer of Calling Out Bravo 7. So for those of you who haven't seen that, that's the movie that really is made by firefighters for firefighters. So it's great to have you here too, Paul.
Can I step in on that a second, Erik?
Sure.
I'm very critical of 9/11 movies, and Bravo 7 is one that I didn't find anything in there that I found objectionable, which is rather rare in this genre. Usually there's some good stuff and some garbage, but there's no garbage in this. It's a really excellent movie, and I recommend it to all of you. And I'm going to step back out.
Thank you, David, and thank you for the invite, Erik, and good to be here, and look forward to having a an interesting conversation.
Beautiful. Thank you, Paul. All right. And next up is Corbin. Corbin Nikolai. He's a Vancouver firefighter, been with Vancouver, Canadian firefighter, and been with Vancouver Fire Department for 7 years. And he brings a unique perspective too, being he's a second generation firefighter and brings that younger, the new generation that's really seeing this with new eyes and willing to talk about it more than some of the old crusty guys, I guess you could say. So it's like he brings a fresh energy, and really excited to see what he adds to this movement.
Here, and it's an honor to be able to put forth an effort to bring closure and all that to the movement.
Thank you, Corbin. And then next up we have Tony. So Tony Robbins, he's got a name that's very familiar. So it's an honor to have you here, Tony. Tony and I met in person at the Fallen Firefighters Memorial this last year and really connected deeply. And he's got a lot of experience in a lot of different things. And one of the things I love about Tony is he's has this real positive attitude and is able to share 9/11 truth with whoever he runs into. And I didn't tell you this, Tony. I was actually in an Uber, ran into a guy that knew you, and it was like, the first thing he said, he's like, all he talks about is 9/11. And I was like, yeah, that's Tony, I know. So it was awesome. I'll tell you about it later. But it's great to have you here, Tony.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm honored to be in everyone's presence here.
Yeah.
And there's one more, I think, isn't there?
There is.
We get everybody?
No, there's John's next.
Yeah.
So John works with Tony, and John has Tony and John are both with North Kansas City Fire. And John has been there has 27 years. You said 1993 is when you started. And John and I are just kind of getting to know each other. So if there's something else you want to share about, there's going to be questions, but anything you want to add to your bio, feel free.
No, I'll just hold off.
Okay, cool. Thanks, John. It's great to have you here.
You.
Yeah. All
Okay.
right. Thank you, David.
Is that it? Go ahead, Eric.
That's it of the firefighters, yes.
Okay, well, Erik provided me with some potential questions, and it turns out some of these came from Paul, I guess. So, but in any case, just to structure the conversation a bit, I'm going to throw out a question, and we're going to see how it goes. If I have these guys all with unmuted mics, so they can jump in as they see fit, but I'm going to try to bring them all into the conversation. So the first question is,
before you start, David, I just want to add a little bit of context and intention. Part of what our new approach is to reach out to more firefighters, to help firefighters see that there are others standing up. So the intention of these questions is to kind of help connect. And if there's firefighters watching this later, to see that, we're all kind of coming from the same place and
good.
Just make it as real as we can.
Erik, can I also add that it's important to point out that we're speaking in a private capacity, and I personally don't seek to represent the views of the organisation that employs me, etc., just to avoid any pushback or backlash.
Yes.
All right. Everybody here is speaking for themselves, but they're speaking from the kind of experience that they hold in common with a lot of other people. So, okay. What was your experience and perspective on the day of 9/11, and when did you see beyond the official story? So that is the first one I want to pass around. And if any of the firefighters want to be the first to jump in on that, otherwise I'll start calling on people.
So the day 9/11 happened, I was probably 10 or 11 years old. And I woke up in the morning to my mom telling me planes had hit the trade centers. Had no idea what those were at the time. Then I saw the footage, and I thought that doesn't look right at all. Got to school, and then when we watched the towers collapse, I was kind of blown away, because in my mind, I was like, there's no way those planes could bring those towers down. And then they collapsed in on themselves. And I always thought about this. Have you ever seen a Jenga set collapse in on itself? It usually falls one way or the other when it's weakened on any side. And that was pretty shocking to me. And after that, I didn't really think much of it until I was probably 22. I got in the fire service when I was 23 years old. And I met guys on the job who opened my eyes more. They said, yeah, there's more to this than just terrorists. Like, you think buildings fall like that. And then after that, I learned about Tower 7, which was, to me, yeah, the smoking gun, right? You see that, and it defies all logic in anyone's brain. You show that to a regular person off the street. They don't have to be a structural engineer, a firefighter, or a demolition expert. You see that, and you go, that does not look right at all. And that's pretty much it.
Hey, Chris, would you like to jump in on this one?
Okay. 9/11, I was very close to the trade centers. Actually saw the second plane hit. We heard the first plane hit. Went home, and it was just disbelief and shock. And I guess it took about 10 years for things to start coming together. In I question the official narrative. Somebody, one of the guys at work, was showing me pictures of Building 7, and I had never really saw close-up pictures of the building coming down. And once I saw that, that really set me off. And since then, we've been actively involved. I actually hit Richard Gage's website, Architects and Engineers, and that was tremendous, and that really got me going. That spurred me on. And to answer the other question about why firefighters aren't speaking out, there's
We're going to come back to that one, but you can go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry, Dave.
You can jump the gun. Go ahead and say what you want.
Yeah, you have volunteer firefighters and you have paid firefighters. And the paid firefighters will always be reluctant to talk about 9/11 because there's political considerations there. You're actually going against the official narrative, and you could bring down the brass on top of you. You could conceivably lose your job, or they could do things to you. Whereas in the volunteer fire service, it depends on what department you're in. You don't get paid to do it. So there is no political constraints.
Paul Simon?
Yeah, hi. Yeah, so in 2001, I was a rookie in the fire service, and working in the UK, we're probably 5 hours ahead of New York. So we'd been at an incident that morning, and we were on the way back to the station, and one of the guys stopped at a florist's to buy some flowers for one of the wives on the station, just had a baby, and the florist inside said, "You need to get back to the station and put the TV set on, something big going off in America." So we did as we were told and rushed back to the station, put the TV on. We watched with disbelief what we were seeing on the TV screens, and there must have been about 8 to 10 guys in the room, and we were speechless. But I do remember one prominent agreement that we all came to the same conclusion. When the first tower collapsed, we were all like, Jesus, they've planted bombs in there. And it was like, we all agreed with each other straight away that there's something else involved there. And then when the second tower went down, we all agreed the same. Shit, they put explosives in those buildings as well. And, we didn't know why that would be. And I just thought that was, thinking back all those years, that was our immediate impression, because at that point we hadn't been manipulated by the media and had ideas put in our heads about what could have happened. But our immediate impression was that explosives must have been involved for those buildings to come down the way that they had. Unfortunately, back in 2001, I was quite unawake, as it were, and didn't really question any. It wasn't until probably 2014 that I really started to question it, and that only happened because the guy at the station had played that 30-second clip of Building 7 coming down, and he explained that the official explanation was it came down due to fires, and my immediate thought was absolutely no way. That's not fires, and they said there must be other factors involved, and at that point I decided to look further, and that took me on the journey that's got me to where I am now with my understanding of it. So those are my impressions, and that's what led me to question it further, and I'll talk a little bit more later about where I've arrived at and where I'm at now with it.
So that was quite a long interval between the beginning and when you re-engaged with it. So
yeah, I was one of these individuals. I lived in a little bit of a bubble. I was obsessed with triathlons. All I cared about was going to work and then going home, swimming, biking, running, and go to bed and repeat. That was my life.
Okay. See, John Yenger, have you spoken yet? I don't think so.
No, I haven't.
I'm looking for your name here on this list here.
All right.
There you go.
Turn the volume up here.
There you go.
Okay. Started off, got a phone call from a friend. She said, turn on the television, and I saw the second building get struck. Turned my wife, based on fire 1 and 2. I had turned her and said that building's going to fall down in about 20 minutes because I was under the impression of the same firefighter 1 stuff, steel losing 50% of its strength and whatnot. If you remember, we were early on in this days of the internet, and I had never been afraid of looking at anything subversive or different ideas. I always, want to hear all different types of viewpoints. And
could you lean towards your mic a little bit, John?
yes. Can you hear me okay now?
That's a lot better, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. So I've always never been afraid to look at various ideas and various things. And 9/11 is the big event, but there were so many other events that historically, things were coming back to me, like the Fred P. Murrah building being blown up. And when I went back and started investigating all these other events and stuff, it caused me to dig deeper and deeper and deeper. And I came across John Cole's engineering exercise about thermite. And Mr. Chandler, it's a pleasure to finally be able to speak with you. You've always been one of my heroes. I watched your videos from a physics standpoint. I had it in high school. I went to the chief and I asked the chief, I said, hey, would you have taken us up inside that building? And he said, yes. And it scared me to my bones. And I was like, oh my God, because in my mind, I thought I was correct that those buildings would have collapsed based upon the education I received about being firefighter 1 or 2. And the chief, I asked him, I said, why would you have done that? Why would you have taken that? He said, well, John, that's never happened before. And that sent me on the path. And that's kind of it in a nutshell. It sent me looking and looking and looking.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So maybe some of the others can comment on why you realize that why did the firemen go up into that? I think that's a good question. And I think your chief is sort of implying that this kind of thing just doesn't happen in those cases. But if anyone has anything to add to that.
It's recognised standard operating procedure to commit fire crews into high-rise buildings, and in Britain we do what's called we create what's called a bridgehead, two floors below the fire floor, and it's like a forward staging area. I think that's what you guys call it, staging area. But basically, it's a forward control point because you're usually going into a fire using breathing apparatus. You need to put your breathing apparatus on as late as possible, committing into the building. So you need to find a safe point that you can rely upon to do that as near to the fire as possible. So we'll go all the way into the building and go up to 2 floors below the fire, create a bridgehead or a forward staging point, and then go in from there. And we do that because we know that these buildings, steel-framed, fire-protected buildings, or like Grenfell, as a poured concrete construction building, that they're designed to compartmentalize and protect against fire spread. So, and withstand the stresses of the fire loading that's in the building. So it's perfectly safe, based on dynamic risk assessments, to go into the building and at an advanced point and make decisions based upon the behavior and the travel of the fire, and commit to the operation from a position within the building, because we know they're not coming down. And basically that's what we do.
Mm-hmm. I think I missed Tony. Are you there, Tony?
When 9/11 happened, I was at home. I was engaged to be married. It was a new home. I was working on remodeling it, painting the living room, and received a phone call from a friend, and he said, "Turn on the television and watch what's happening." And I was just in complete shock. I was hurt that our country could be attacked in that way. It was a very long time before I ever had any inclination that 9/11 didn't happen the way that it did. And the first inclination was a question from my driver, John, who you just heard from, and he's here with me tonight. He said, "What do you think happened?" And I said, "Well, I'm pretty sure about it. And I know that evil people in the Middle East pulled this off, and I was completely wrong." So it took me a very, very long time to receive snippets of information and things that I just really didn't want to face. It was so hard to admit that I had been manipulated in that way. And there was a lot of soul searching through the course of years, and I owe it to my buddy. We're a crew now. He's my driver. We operate a pumper, and we've used each other to provide balance and support, and we've turned into this research team. We're well known at our department for being the conspiracy theory guys, but I have a great deal of hope. The younger generation is not afraid. They are asking the right questions. People who live through it, not so much. It's a psychological battle. So I do have hope for our future.
Good. Erik, we haven't really heard from you. Did you have anything you want to add?
Sure. I don't know if I've ever really shared that part, so I think that's a good spot to start. Let's see. There's Tony still there. Let's see.
You're spotlighted, I think.
There we go. No. So anyways, yeah, for me, I was at home also, and I was on one of the 2 federal FEMA teams. I was on an MMST team, it was called. So I was expecting to be called up and was really disappointed when I wasn't. And what I saw too immediately, soon after we saw the second strike, knew it was a terrorist attack. I was hearing all these words, all the firefighters talking about explosions and that. So I immediately thought that this was a terrorist attack using bombs and planes because of the 93 tower. That was my initial, that's what's happening. And the other piece for me at the time was my lieutenant that I'd had been with at that point I think 5 years. Yeah, a little over 5 years. And he's a writer, and he actually writes fire novels. And so they're kind of fictional novels, but he's pretty well known. And before 9/11, he had actually spent about 2 years using us also. We helped him researching high-rise fires for his novel, because he wanted to see what would it take to bring a high-rise down, and what he found out was a concrete and steel frame building had never been brought down by fire. So he immediately knew this was something was wrong. That once this official story came out, I quickly went into that hypnosis mode. I was believing that story and what kept being repeated, and so I went from thinking that these were explosives to now following the official narrative, and I went hardcore into it. Like Tony said, I actually was really ashamed looking back years later, going, I literally told my lieutenant, because he kept saying, this is not right. These buildings were not brought down by fire, and it's somebody else involved. And I told him actually to leave the country. So with anyone who would argue that, I would get really angry with. And it was about 7 years later. And the thing that kind of woke me up was, it was a friend, a military vet, actually he was a West Point graduate, and he came over and told me, he said, if I didn't know better, I would swear someone's trying to destroy our economy. And this was right before the bank collapses. And I said, what are you talking about? And as soon as he shared more, that night is when I started researching who controls the money. And I went right in and I found a lot of different things, and everything kept pointing to 9/11. And it was literally in less than 24 hours, I went from being totally asleep to having new eyes, being able to see it all. And it was a pretty brutal awakening, to say the least.
So I think I'll move on to the next question, which is, it says here, what has been your reaction, and emotionally and actively? Some of you have spoken of that already. Part of it, I think, I would really like to have more discussion of what the culture is within the fire community, on whether, how this is being received, or how it's potentially being received by other people in the firefighting community. So that's partly just sort of speculative, but I mean, it's like, the people you're dealing with. Does that sound like a good direction to go here? We can start with you, Erik, since you're right here. And I think your screen froze up, so I don't know what you can do. Maybe if I switch to somebody else, and we'll come back to you. So let me start with Tony. You're sitting there. Are you ready to answer that, Tony?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I'll spotlight you on this one. What is your sense of the culture in the firefighting community with respect to 9/11 today?
I think it's very mixed. I think you have a lot of division within the fire service. There's still a lot of us that were active duty firefighters when it happened, and it takes a lot of soul searching, and it takes a lot of research before you ever get a big picture. I mean, some people have this inclination, yeah, something's wrong. I don't understand the full picture, and they just stop there. It's too scary for them, or it takes too much effort. We live in this society where everything is almost spoon-fed to us, whether you're receiving an education through college, or things are assigned to you. 9/11 is something that requires a great deal of effort to go out and look. It almost requires a mentor, somebody that you're around all the time to point you in the right direction, because there's so much disinformation. There's controlled opposition. There are people putting things out that are complete nonsense. Like you said before, Mr. Chandler, you said that that calling out Bravo 7 is one of the most accurate documentaries available on the internet, and that's the one we should be pointing people into the direction of, because once they see something that's nonsense, they just forget about it. They're like, yeah, whatever. I don't need to fill up my time and effort full of nonsense, even if they suspect something is amiss. So the younger generation knows something is up. They keep seeing these events play out like the coronavirus. We've seen unnecessary war for the last 19 years. And a lot of them are veterans. Why were we over there? And what can we do? I think there's a real genuine sense of people that are looking, but they just don't know where to look.
Mm-hmm.
And they're afraid of the repercussions. You have a chief that, will chastise you at the moment, how dare you look at this in this way? It happened the way it happened, like we saw on TV. And that's hard for a young firefighter to see through.
John, are you sitting right there? You guys are in the same room, aren't you?
Yes.
Let me put the spotlight on you for a second. So, do you have any further comments on that?
Yes.
Turn my
There you go. Turn mine up.
muted.
Oh, I can hear you fine.
Okay.
You might have to lean towards the mic.
Can you read down for me, Tony?
Yeah.
Okay. I felt it early on. There was a lot of cognitive dissonance with a lot of people. You could present a whole bunch of information. I had a basic understanding, high school level physics, and I could still rattle off B equals B times 2 plus 1/2 times 9.8 times T squared. So I would use that as an argument. And when you presented people with basic information about class 1 construction, how it works, and the history of it, I met a lot of resistance. But I'm not a person who's afraid to fight. I just grew up fighting, and conflict, when we're just using words, is easy for me. I don't have a problem with it. Difficult situations, difficult talks, I'm good with. I can talk about anything. I think I was probably brought up and bred to do this job as a fireman because of my childhood. It made me not afraid because of everything that I had went through. So facing death, facing the idea of things, and I started looking at so many other things. And like I said before, 9/11 is a piece of this great big puzzle. Things like Zeitgeist, Bravo 7, Mr. Chandler's videos regarding physics, John Cole's engineering stuff where he presented the idea of thermite, loose change, architects and 9/11, pilots for 9/11 truth. There were so many different avenues. This was a global 360-degree look of so many different things, and it all came together for me in my head. So, like I said, like Tony was saying, we've met lots of resistance. The younger generation, we get them here, we can show them various things and then put them on the path, but still it's up to each individual. It's a real hard truth when you grow up thumping your chest about our country and whatnot, but I'd always had questions in my head. Why were we always the ones at war? Well, when I started to understand finance and banking and how money was created and why and who controls that money, then it really started to come together. The people that were caught on the George Washington Bridge, the USS Liberty, just so many events, our banking system. Ed Griffith wrote a book about the creature from Jekyll Island. It puts it all together. But anyway, we all have our own stories, so I don't want
to. Okay. Chris, do you have something to add here?
Oh, I definitely know about the pushback. That's for sure. I've heard it from other chiefs. I heard it from other commissioners, and I just tell them, look, we have to just stick to the facts and what can be proved. without getting into, speculating and going off half-cocked on all these other crazy ideas and notions. If we stick with the facts, stay safe in that regard, stay on point, and then you'll be able to get people on board with that instead of engaging in everything. You just say, look, and Mr. Chandler, you know as well as I, you can't argue with physics. You can't argue with building construction. You can't argue with, how fire acts. These are things that these are knowns, and there's nothing in the world that's going to change that. And they weren't suspended, and they weren't modified on 9/11. And in that regard, that's how this needs to be approached. We have two ongoing efforts from the architects and engineers and the lawyers committee for 9/11 inquiry. You have a letter to NIST requesting correction on the collapse of Building 7, and you also have the ongoing legal action before the United States Attorney for the Southern District of New York. And those are very significant actions that are pending. And if we get positive results from either or, then that will be huge.
Okay. Paul?
Yeah. In the UK, it's probably more. There's a lack of questioning because we're subjected to the brainwashing and the media manipulation, just like everyone else. If not over here, more so because we have the BBC and everybody trusts the BBC because they have this idea that because we pay for it, it's impartial when it isn't. When you put firefighters in front of the facts and the evidence, like in calling that Bravo 7, or you just show them Building 7 coming down, you say that is claimed to have come down just by fires alone, they immediately start to question it, and we're probably less restrained by our limitations which might occur due to patriotism, etc., because it's something that happened somewhere else. It's something that happened a very long way away. But at the same time, that distance also has its problems because it's seen as somebody else's problem. But then when you explain to people that 9/11 isn't as the oversimplified explanation, i.e. an inside job, it's more than that. And that it's something that affects everybody internationally on many, many fronts. They start to take a bit more interest, but I think it's just that it's very, very difficult to find anybody who, once they grasp the facts, take ownership of it and want to do anything about it. And that's one of the most frustrating things I've found with being involved in this. One thing I will say is that British firefighters would be a lot more inclined to be more active, to be engaged, and to perhaps put pressure on our institutions over here to help or to answer questions if they saw the same coming from America. But because they don't, they think that it's somebody else's problem, and because of the apathy in America, or the apparent apathy in America, there's apathy over here. So it'd be really nice to see more action coming from over the Atlantic, and if that were the case, I think you'd see a lot more people over here asking questions and making it more of an issue.
Mm-hmm. When people ask me about the relevance, the ongoing relevance here, it was nearly 20 years later. I say it wasn't an event in the past, it was a turning point, and it's really recast the whole direction of world history, really. So I think there is an ongoing urgency to understand what happened that's beyond just a historical curiosity, you know?
Yeah, and I would say that if anyone can question this openly without criticism, without being marginalized, firefighters can. And they can do that because it's part of our responsibility to learn from incidents, wherever that incident occurred, whether it was here, whether it was in a foreign country. And we do that because we can learn from the incidents and share the knowledge, so not just for safety, but to for the evolution of firefighting procedures. And at the end of the day, we lost 343 of our colleagues on that day, and it was a crime, and it needs to be investigated properly, regardless of where it happened.
You're saying there were British? You're saying there were British firefighters there?
No, they're all American. There were British. There were 67 British civilians killed in the Twin Towers, and but regardless, we see ourselves as an international community of firefighters. So it's something which British firefighters. I mean, if the majority of the British firefighters understood that it isn't what we're told by the BBC and these other mainstream media sources, they really understood that this whole concept of the conspiracy theorist is just nonsense, and realised what happened, I think there would be quite an impressive reaction. But it's slowly evolving, but it needs to evolve more, and we need to see a stronger upwelling of feeling in America before the British, sit up and start to take notice.
Mm-hmm. Good. Corbin.
Yeah, like what Chris was saying, the taboo of speaking about 9/11 is kind of, it's huge in the fire department, right? You got a lot of older firefighters who they're set in their ways, and they don't want to think about that stuff because it's hard, right? Thinking about somebody's willing to do that to their own countrymen, first responder, and then in return, 20 years of war where there's been millions of deaths. And it's horrifying to think that's a reality. And then you got Paul, who's talking about the apathy, right? And yeah, you have a lot of guys who'd rather just not think about it. They say, I've got other things to worry about. I have a father who's in the fire service and a brother as well. They're not as on board as I am. But once I connected with a now acting captain on the job, he opened my eyes and he said, oh, I've heard about you. You're outspoken about 9/11. I said, I've heard about you. You've been there. He was at the pile pulling bodies out. He's been a huge inspiration to me about continuing with this because it is hard. You're criticized by fellow firefighters, by senior guys who you're looking up to, and it's not easy to do. But then as the years have gone by, the junior guys coming up underneath me, and they're just open-minded, and they look at it and they go, there's no way that was brought down by fire. Like, those towers don't fall like that. Where was the plane in Pennsylvania? Where was the plane at the Pentagon? And the whole story is very large. And if one part is off, the whole thing is off. So I see there being a lot of optimism in the future because the generation coming up, just like I am, we're open-minded and we're thinking of things in a bigger way. And what are the motives? Oil, war, right? So it may all make sense.
Mm-hmm. Erik, coming back to you, last I left you, your picture was frozen. Are you available again?
I'm here now. Switched Wi-Fi stuff. Yeah.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. For the culture, for me, when I first started speaking with Firefighters for 9/11 Truth in 2008, I was brought into the chief's office on a pretty regular basis, and he told me that I was on this, or he was on speed dial with the chief of the FDNY. That chief did not want me talking about what I was talking about. So thankfully my chief believed in the First Amendment. He said, as long as you're not connecting it with Seattle Fire and you're speaking as you individually, I'm going to protect your freedom of speech, but I don't agree with you. And so I thanked him for that. And then just most recently, one of the people that was going to be on this call, I've got to be careful with how I say this, but he's in a position of some pretty significant influence nationally now in the United States for high-rise fires. And he's recently woken up to it. And he was going to be on this call. And once he checked in with some of his mentors and colleagues, they were like, no, do not. I mean, they didn't tell him he couldn't do it, but they said it will destroy your career if you do it. So if you want to speak out, just know this, the position you're in, you won't have the influence you do now. So there's still this, it's this fear of like, what will happen to me if I speak out? And I think the only way we're going to overcome that is by more of us being willing to speak up. So we're not alone. So we're not, you know, the lone nuts or the conspiracy theorists. We're, you know, a force of firefighters around the world saying, we need to look at this. That's what I'm here to support.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my own website on this is called 9/11 Speak Out, and the whole theme of Speak Out for me is important as clearing the way for others to speak out. Okay, so in other words, by one person speaking out, it somehow gives permission for others. Okay. Is there something else, Erik, that you wanted to cover right here? Because one of the things you had suggested was playing that little collage of, or a little composite of Building 7 coming down. I can go ahead and do that.
I think it's been covered mostly here, because
Okay.
just due to time and, you know, leaving space for people to ask questions.
Well, we have plenty of time.
Okay.
We're pretty much on schedule here. Let me play this just as a reminder. I have a different clip than the one you sent me. It's a really good composite that Nate Flock put together. So let me bring that up just briefly here.
For the third time today, it's reminiscent of those pictures we've all seen too much on television before, when a building was deliberately destroyed by well-placed dynamite to knock it down.
Did they actually use the word brought down, and who was it that was telling you this?
The fire department. And they did use the word, we're going to have to bring it down.
We heard this sound that sounded like a clap of thunder. It looked like there was a shock wave ripping through the building, and the windows all busted out. About a second later, the bottom floor caved out. The building followed after that, and we saw the building crash down all the way to the ground.
And I turned in time to see what looked like a skyscraper implosion. Looked like it had been done by a demolition crew. The whole thing just collapsing down on itself.
It was almost as if it were a planned implosion. It just pancaked.
So, okay. It's interesting in that clip. I don't know if anybody could hear the audio that went with that very well, but you know, the comments that supposedly the fire department was involved with, you know, speculating on whether they'd have to bring the building down, so forth like that. Do any of you? I'm going to let you just jump in if you have something to comment on that. That's one of the things, like, what is the role of the fire department on the day of 9/11, and maybe they're being attributed to things that they really didn't get involved with, but how do we sort all that out?
I can answer that. Rudy Dent said it best, and never in our training are we trained to pull it, as say Larry Silverstein had said. That's not our job. Our job is to protect that structure, to save what we can, to save life and property. And destroying the building is not our job. That's not our business. We're not in the business of demolitions. So, does it seem plausible that had they decided to take it down, that they could have done that in a day? Is that even a plausible thing, or is that just fiction? Fiction.
Mm-hmm. Any others? Okay, go ahead, Paul.
All right. So when I looked at the fires in Building 7, my as a firefighter, my immediate thoughts were that would have been a really, really good job to be involved with. It would have been a fire that would have been fun to have fought. It would have been something that was very, very manageable. There's lots of questions to be asked about why it wasn't fought. I mean, most of the fires were on the lower floors, weren't they? There were fires on the upper floors, but most of those burnt out. I mean, there's questions to be asked about how falling debris could ignite fires simultaneously on so many floors in an environment of dry gypsum dust acting basically like a suffocating dry powder. There's questions to be asked there, but the fire should have been very easily managed and tackled, and there's various allegations that have been made about lack of water supplies and sprinkler system failing and all that sort of thing. And then you've got the fact that at 6:47 in the morning, the fire alarm system had been disabled for 8 hours, was due to come back on at 2:47 in the afternoon, but never did. But from a practical standpoint, looking at the size of the fires and where they would have actually been quite good fun to have tackled, and they could have been tackled quite safely. If you took that building out of New York and separated it from a scenario where the two other towers had collapsed in the morning and there'd been a massive loss of life, and then there was speculation from within the OEM, and there was, in the testimony given by Richard Zerillo, quite clearly stated that there was a guy called John somebody or other within OEM who told people within the OEM that both the twin towers were going to collapse, and at that point there was a lot of activity and to and fro, and people saying we need to get our men out, but they never did. So somehow there was this strange foreknowledge coming from within the OEM that the towers were going to collapse, and that couldn't possibly have been known without some other strange foreknowledge. But looking at the fires from a firefighter's point of view, they would have been easily tackled. If there was any suspicion of the building being unsafe inside for whatever reason, like the damage to the south face was so extensive, and there's witness testimony of firefighters walking the full length of that south side, then there's no reason why the fires couldn't have been dealt with from outside, either by area ladder platforms putting water into the fire floors that are most affected by the fire, from the north side, or charging the, I'm not 100% sure on this, but I'm 95% sure that the sprinkler system could have been charged from Siamese fittings, and there's two main Siamese fittings on the building. So there's ample evidence to indicate that there was good water supplies, either from the mains, the city mains, or via the fire boats on the Hudson. So there's lots of evidence to suggest, even throughout the NIST documents, that there was water supplies available to tackle those fires. So the excuses given by NIST that the sprinkler system didn't operate and the firefighting was curtailed because of this strange preconception that that building was going to fail for some reason, yet there was no historical precedent to indicate why that would be, just doesn't make sense, and should make every firefighter sit up and question the absurdity of their proposed hypothesis for why that building collapsed in the way that it did.
Okay. We have questions coming in from the audience in the chat. I'm trying to make sense of the chat over here. Adam Fitzgerald, you had a question, and I can't quite make out what it was, but I'm going to put you on here if I can find you. There you are. Unmute. So can you speak now?
Hey, good evening. Thank you for having me. I know that the firemen here are not demolition experts by any means, but my question is an opinion-based question anyway. And my question would be the following. And I'd like to hear from each one, even though John Junger gave his answer in the chat, I'll ask the rest. What area of the World Trade Center would be the primary source to undermine the structure's strength in order to initiate a progressive collapse? And then the follow-up would be, what incendiary would be needed to initiate said collapse?
Okay, who wants to take that one?
I guess I'll take it.
Okay.
Like you said, we're not experts in that. I was present. I've been present on several building demolitions, including the Kingdom in Seattle. And I talked to several of them. I was on duty, and so our job was to make sure everyone was safe and out of the area, and talk to a lot of the demolition guys there. And what most people don't know is there was a failure in that demolition. Actually, the arch of it wasn't brought down at exactly the same time. Something went wrong, and so it became a plunger, and it did a lot more damage and actually hit some fire trucks and firefighters and things like that. So what they helped us see was, you know, and I just know from common sense, playing with things, watching many buildings collapse from fire, it leans, it falls over. If it's not a demolition, it's going to fall and it's going to topple. When it's a demolition, every column has to be taken out at the same time. And with that king dome, we were able to see what happens when there was failures, and it totally changed the demolition. So, and you can watch those online yourself, demolitions gone wrong. And even when those don't hit exactly the perfection, they topple. So the fact that this thing came perfectly down, in my experience, that's an impossibility without demolition.
Okay. Bill 2018, I'm going to unmute you. And we have a question from you. Can you speak? We're not hearing you. You have to try the unmute button, Bill.
How's that?
That's good.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, great. Well, I'm Bill Jacoby, and just wanted to thank you guys for putting this show on. This is very important. And I wanted to mention that on the 9/11 TAP board meeting last week, we voted that we want to help the fire initiative that Chris Joya began in any way that we can. We have Richard Krushnick on the phone from Boston, who's, I know, working on one such effort and talked about it before. We've got people in a number of, by that I mean primarily putting up truth booths. Our feeling is that we've held back, although a few people have contacted firehouses, but we didn't want to do it too much without the leadership of the firemen, because as we've discussed with Chris, it's clearly better for firemen, for the initial dialogue and contact to be made fireman to fireman. And we actually slowed some people down from going to firehouses directly for fear that it might turn them against the cause rather than help it. But our thought is that as we get further with our Truth Booth project, we have booths available to new towns, new cities where hopefully new chapters will get formed, that if firemen can be at all successful in doing as some of you guys have done in generating small numbers, at least from within your firehouses, we would like to work with you to develop kind of community area truth action groups, and firemen would be ideal for leading that kind of an initiative or transition. We'll, I understand, Chris, you'll be on our call on Thursday when Nick Harrison is present. And I hope down the road, as we come out of this co-virus thing, that there'll be ways that Truth Action Project booths and local group formation can supplement and support the initiatives that you guys take in the communities. And if there's anything else we can do to support, we want to do it.
David Schlesinger had something he wanted to say.
Yes, and thanks so much. Yes, I helped start the firefighters outreach work team at AE 9/11 Truth when I was there, and Dale Pierce was the initial team leader. He only had been a firefighter for a summer as a teenager. But there are dozens of people who have signed the AE petition who list background in firefighting. And with Richard Gage's permission, I can't imagine that you couldn't find some of them. If they've changed their phone or email, I can help you get current ones. I have software for that. But there are dozens of people who've signed the AE petition who list firefighting in their background.
Okay. I am looking to see if there's anyone else who's...
Maybe you can get Richard to say, yes, you can have access to that list, or he can help you get such a list.
Okay.
Thank you, David.
Was that Richard? I see a Richard Kushner raising his hand. Is that, I know you're asking about Richard Gage. I don't see him on here right now. Let me just go to this question.
Our group in Boston has agreed to support the firefighters. I believe there's a couple of guys who have taken the letter written from the New York district there. We were told from your effort that we were supposed to not, when we approached the firehouse, we were not supposed to say anything about our opinion or our affiliation or anything, that we were merely assisting the firemen in distributing this letter that they had written, and were urging them to read it. And I'm ashamed to admit I committed to do that here in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and I have not yet done it. But
can you clarify the source of this letter?
I'm sorry, I'm blanking out on the name. It's the, is it Chris? Is it Chris's letter?
Joya?
Yes, that letter. Yes, okay. That's the letter. And there's, I think a couple of guys have already done that here in their towns from our group. I haven't done it yet, but I've committed to do it, and I will do it. So that was how we were instructed to proceed, that we were not to say anything about whatever, you know, Boston 9/11 Truth or anything about our opinions or our involvement or anything. We were simply messengers that were helping some firemen get some communication to other firemen, and leave it at that. And
are you asking a question to somebody, or just
no, I was just chiming in that that's what we're trying to get going here. Okay. To support the work of the firemen.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Richard, you were involved in, Richard Gage, this one now. You were involved with getting a new movie out on 7. Would you like to say a few words about that?
Yeah, we figured out how to.
Oh, you don't have a video, you just have a portrait there.
And yes, to the earlier question, we'd be happy to provide the list of firefighters. Actually, what we do is I'll write an email personally to our supporters, inviting them, those who have firefighting experience, to get in touch with Erik, or however he wants to do that. Regarding the movie 7, it's very exciting. It's based on the Leroy Halsey Alaska study, and that has conclusively proven that the building 7 could not have come down by fire. It's a fascinating independent review, and Dylan Avery, the maker of Loose Change, is just about done making a 45-minute film on that study, interviewing our engineers. Leroy Halsey went to the site at the college. So we now have published a 5-minute version of that 45-minute film, and that's playing now on PBS, guaranteed to be seen by 9 million people, 3 million people around the country, because hundreds and hundreds of our supporters put together $9,000 for that effort, and we'll do it again if you know, especially if we get any positive results. So I'm very excited about this film coming out in August. It should be coming out, the big version, and it looks like we have a big wig distributor picking it up. So I can't talk about that, but it's very exciting.
We were pretty much at the time we'd planned, so we could end this at whatever time seems appropriate, unless I don't want people to feel that they've been cut off if they have a short question.
John
just a
Younger
second here.
had posted a comment about social media and how they've distanced themselves from you because you spoke out, and I'd like to address that. His family was distancing themselves, and I just wanted to tell you and other people out there that if you tell these people that if somebody was murdered in their family and years went by and evidence arose after all these years that pointed in a different direction, wouldn't you want to look at that evidence? Because that's all we're really saying, is that we need to look at all of this evidence that has been accumulated by all of you, and it's been put together now, and it's never been looked at. And that's all we're saying. We want to get this evidence into a court of law and let the facts lead us in the direction that we need to go. So, John, maybe if you put it in those terms to your family and your friends, that's all you're saying. You're not engaging in conspiracy theories. You're interested in pursuing justice for the people who were killed and were murdered. That's all you're doing, and that you want this to get into a court of law, which it has never been done. And that is how the system is set up, that we look at all the evidence. If the evidence has merit, then we go in that direction. If the evidence doesn't have merit, well, that's the end of that. Then we look elsewhere. So don't get discouraged. And for others out there who are listening, I would not get discouraged because of the pushback or the naysayers or the people who would, just seek to blow all of this off. People were murdered, and the course of the world was altered, and it has a tremendous impact on all of us, and we all have a stake in the game, and that we really need to take a stand and get to the bottom of this and get justice and get things back on track.
Okay. Would anyone of the firefighters like to make any kind of closing remarks or comments that you feel like? Maybe let me put it back to Erik, and you can then pass it to whoever else might want it. You were the original invited guest. Maybe you can deliver any kind of summation that you want to do and take it from there. And you also have some ongoing activities, I believe, in Boulder, Colorado that you saw as springing out of this. I don't know if that's something you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, thank you, David. First, I just want to, express my gratitude for all the firefighters on here. And I know a lot of the people on this call too have spent many years shining the spotlight on 9/11 and keeping it in their heart and realizing the importance of this. And so I just want to acknowledge that this is, we are coming on the 20 years. For me, this is something, 9/11 has defined me in so many ways. It's impacted my life from both helping me see how I could believe a lie and live that lie for so long, and then helping me, see that I could direct my energy towards groups. What I started noticing was whenever I'm blaming someone else, that I'm giving my power away. And when I'm actually able to see my own responsibility in this whole thing, in this mess, and part of that is the fact that I didn't research this myself. I just believed what I was told, that when I give my power away, a lot of horrible things can happen. And so what this invitation is to firefighters that might be watching this at some point, is what so many of us have said, is just stop and really look at this again, because 343 of our brothers were murdered that day, and thousands of other Americans and people from around the world, and like Corbin brought up, millions in the wars that have followed. So it is not only like something that's a hobby or whatever, this is our duty as firefighters. We're here to serve the public. And if we continue living this lie as firefighters, it is a huge disservice and it's a dishonor to the brotherhood to continue living that lie. So I'm challenging you to take the time to look into this yourself. Don't believe everything outside of yourself. Check in with your heart. Look at the evidence and see what you see. Can you really justify it? And if you can't, you see what's going on in the world. You see the increasing tensions, the increasing everything. We have to stand up. And if we don't, we see the world we're going to get. So it's time to stand up as brothers and sisters in the fire service and plant a flag for a better world. And so that's what I want to end with for myself. And it's just a huge honor to be here. And thank you to the firefighters and Richard Gage and everybody else that joined us tonight.
Could you give your website?
Yeah, for Firefighters for 9/11 Truth, it's ff911truth.org. And we'd love for you, if you sign up, Chris Joya is leading an amazing charge supporting the work that's already being done. And he's in a position, because of where he is in New York and his years of experience and his passion, to really make a difference. And what I want to help support is his work. So it's not, there's going to be several things in the next few months that are coming up. And I think this is the time we unite as a united force in the truth movement. And this truth movement is going to move way beyond 9/11. There's a lot of other truths that need to come out, but we need to own this. And so that's, if you want to join that and help support this cause, then please go to www.ff911truth.org.
Okay. Chris, do you have a website as well?
Yes, I do. It's Justice for 9/11 Heroes.org.
Okay. And I'm not sure who else. I imagine.
Can I say something just to close?
Yes. Okay.
Hi, it's Paul in the UK.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would just like to put a call out to all the firefighters who might watch this. If you're sitting on the fence, or if you're convinced of the evidence that we are, that this needs to be addressed, at firefight level, I would be asking other firefighters to share the information with their colleagues, put them in front of calling out Bravo 7. It's on our website. And then I personally think that we should be pushing our union bodies for a response and for them to take more responsibility on this. We pay them to represent our best interests. We expect them to hold power to account and to speak truth to power, and currently they're not doing that. Firefighters, we should be asking serious questions and putting pressure on bodies like the IAFF and in the UK, the FBU, to look at this seriously, and we need more firefighters putting pressure on them to do that. And that's all I'd like to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So any of the others, there's Tony and John and so forth, any of you guys have anything you wanted to add to this? Are there any organizational efforts that you wanted to? I don't have my list in front of me, all of the, okay, I'm just gonna let it, if anybody speaks out, fine. Fran, would you, here, let me bring you up here. Would you want to give the website for Colorado 9/11 Truth?
Yes. I'll write it in the chat too. It's Colorado 911truth.org. And we will have a video recording of this session, and we'll be posting it at our website. You can access it there.
Okay. So that was Colorado 911truth.org.
Yeah, it's
okay.
without a dash in the 911. It's the Colorado 911truth.org.
Right.
Okay.
No extraneous punctuation. Yes, who's speaking up?
It's Chris Joya.
Oh, hi. Yes, there you are.
I wanted to thank Erik Lawyer for inviting me, and I wanted to say hello to Paul. It's good to finally see you instead of just communicating through emails and texts. And I wanted to thank everybody once again, and you too, David, for allowing me to come on tonight.
That's great. Yeah. Okay. I think everybody has had their say, so I will draw this to a close and thank you all for coming, and keep alert for other possible speakers that the Colorado 9/11 Truth might pull in here, okay? So I think this was a great first experiment with this new technology.
Yeah, I'll mention, David, am I still unmuted?
You're there.
Yeah, just people can go to our website and subscribe, and that way they'll be sure to get the announcement about when this will be posted.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. And I will, I see a few people waving. I assume they're waving goodbye rather than trying to be recognized. But goodbye, one and all. And we'll perhaps see you on another session like this. Okay.
All right. Good deal.
I'm going to hit the end button. That'll end it for everybody. Goodbye.
All right. Have a good night now.
Thank you.
Good night.